There is brand new reporting today on the country's top law enforcement agency pouring time, energy, and resources not into protecting the American people from all of the myriad threats we face here at home and abroad, but instead attacking the free press and pursuing a single journalist who dared to write a deeply unflattering piece of reporting about the director of the FBI. Two people familiar with the matter are telling our colleagues Carol Leonnig and Ken Dilanian that the FBI has opened a criminal leak investigation into Atlantic magazine reporter Sarah Fitzpatrick. You may remember Fitzpatrick wrote an alarming piece of reporting. The headline was "The FBI Director is MIA." For that report, she spoke to more than 24 sources. That reporting detailed Kash Patel's emotional outbursts, his unexplained absences, and excessive drinking to the point that, quote, some of Patel's colleagues at the FBI worry that his personal behavior has become a threat to public safety. Kash Patel sued The Atlantic for publishing that story. Kash Patel claims that the story is defamatory, that it amounts to defamation. The Atlantic is standing by its reporting, even saying that it has received more corroboration about its reporting since the story published. Now the FBI has launched a, quote, so-called insider threat investigation, which is, according to Carol Leonnig and Ken Dilanian, highly unusual because it did not stem from a disclosure of classified information and because it is focused on leaks to a reporter. With this investigation, agents can now try to gain access to Sarah Fitzpatrick's phone and phone records. They can go through her contacts on social media, and they can run her name through various FBI databases. It is something that is making some staffers at the FBI deeply uncomfortable. One source telling MS Now, quote, they know they are not supposed to do this, but if they don't go forward, they could lose their jobs. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. This news today, though, tells us, well, a whole lot about the state of the FBI under Kash Patel and what his priorities are. But it also leads to real legal questions about the lawsuit Kash Patel is bringing against The Atlantic. Because, you see, if The Atlantic's reporting is actually defamation, as Patel claims and seems prepared to argue in court, that would mean that Patel has the goods. He can prove it is all false and that it was printed with malice. But if that's true, then it cannot also be true that a criminal leak investigation is necessary, the kind normally reserved for the disclosure of classified state secrets, of real information. Those two are in legal contradiction. In a statement, an FBI spokesperson denies that the investigation exists at all. The Atlantic said this in a statement, quote, an FBI criminal leak investigation targeting our reporter would represent an outrageous attack on the free press and the First Amendment itself. We will defend The Atlantic and its staff vigorously. We will not be intimidated by illegitimate investigations or other acts of politically motivated retaliation. We will continue to cover the FBI professionally, fairly, and thoroughly, and we will continue to practice journalism in the public interest. That is where we start today with the journalist who broke this story, senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig. Also joining us, former assistant special agent in charge at the FBI, national security intelligence analyst for us, Michael Feinberg. Carol Leonnig, take me through what you and Ken are reporting today.
Yes, with my great colleague Ken Dilanian, we broke a story that honestly made us both really worried for a free press, reporters in the normal, everyday course of news gathering, because we write about this too, and we've written quite a bit about the FBI and about Kash Patel before this Atlantic story ran. What we learned was that the FBI agents in a unit in Huntsville, Alabama, where Director Patel basically transferred tons and tons of agents, hundreds, I think in excess of 500 FBI personnel were transferred to Huntsville. That unit began getting instructions and orders from the executive suite of Patel that they were to investigate and review Sarah Fitzpatrick's interactions with social media, with contacts, with links. We don't know the status right now, Nicole, of whether or not they have compelled any internet or phone providers to turn over her records, metadata and other things about her contacts with sources. but we are told that investigation's ongoing, and the agents involved have raised concern internally, obviously not to the director directly, but have raised concerns that this is not how FBI investigations go. They are typically predicated on a likely crime. They exhaust every means possible in investigations to determine whether a criminal leak has occurred, and they also go to a reporter's information when they are very sure a crime has occurred and they need the information and have exhausted all other means. And this is not what's happening today.
First of all, why did he transfer 500 agents to Huntsville, Alabama?
You know, Patel has a vision or a version of the FBI in his mind in which they are cops. And he believes that having a lot of FBI personnel in Washington is a waste of resources, and sending specialized teams out to field offices, which is what he did, and to Huntsville means fewer people in the so-called bureaucracy. I'm not so sure it accomplishes what he's saying about putting more cops on the street, which, by the way, is not what FBI agents are. But it certainly removes more people from Washington and creates the optic that you have a smaller, slimmed-down headquarters and more people, quote unquote, in the field.
What crime would the agents in Huntsville, Alabama, take a single step that violates her freedoms, that violates her privacy, to even pretend to investigate? The crime of making Kash Patel look like an alcoholic or a bad employee? I mean, like, what crime even gets this out the door?
So I want to be careful about this, Nicole, and I know you know what I'm going to say next. This is ongoing reporting. However, what I can say to you is it is unheard of for any of these steps to be taken when there is not evidence of a disclosure of classified information. However, when Pam Bondi was the Attorney General, she rescinded an important media policy that had been codified and made much more specific by former Attorney General Merrick Garland. And when she repealed that policy about when you can compel, say, a Verizon or, AT&T to turn over phone metadata, she repealed those provisions that required the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General's permission and authority to do that. And in her repeal, she also said that they could have leak investigations for classified information leaks, but also sensitive information leaks. Now, it's not a crime to discuss law enforcement sensitive material. And it's just curious about Bondi's policy that it changed the language ever so slightly. I can see a world in which Kash Patel believes, or his lawyers or his counselors believe, that they can argue that his movements across the country or what his security detail communicate internally is law enforcement sensitive or sensitive about his whereabouts and his safety and his security. We don't know that's what's going on, but I am really pinpointing as an analyst of this event how Bondi's language about when they can begin leak investigations is different from Attorney General Merrick Garland's provisions.
I mean, Michael Feinberg, I always listen very carefully to what Carol Lennox says and doesn't say. And on the doesn't say part, I mean, they have a tool to use their extraordinary powers at the Department of Justice and the FBI to hack into basically, read all of her emails and text messages and encrypted messages in pursuit of a unflattering article about Kash Patel. I mean, that is the worst example, one of the worst examples of people acting in a way that presupposes this moment won't end. It is also part of a pattern. The New York Times reported last week the FBI said to have investigated Times reporter after article on Kash Patel's girlfriend. Tell me what you make of this.
Yeah, I mean, well, first I want to clarify, they can't actually get the content of any of her messages or phone calls or emails without getting an Article 3 independent judge to sign off on it. That's sort of the one bulwark we have left to stop them from totally overreaching. But what we're seeing here is a sea change in terms of how the FBI views its relationship with the American public, the American media, and quite frankly, its place within the social contract. I'm aware of many stories that came out about politicians, not the FBI director, but about public figures during my tenure with the Bureau, where the people who thought they'd been mistreated demanded that an investigation be opened. And every single time, the organization refused. Because if the FBI starts doing something, anything really, that is not based on an actual threat to national security or a violation of criminal law, then it in and of itself has become lawless. It's become a secret police force. I don't think we're there yet. The fact that the agents working on this apparently went to Carol and her colleagues actually gives me hope. But the fact that Kash Patel might have ordered these people to do it in the first place is just exhibit 12,647 that he never should have been picked for this job in the first place. Not just because he lacks the credentials and the experience, but because he lacks the temperament, the judgment, and the integrity.